a quick shout out to my staff advisor, the staff advisor, Mrs. Dr. Anydc. Thank you, Ma, for everything you did for us when we were in school. Going to start my speech in 3, 2, 1. I'm going to be clear on what this debate is about and what this debate ought not to be about, because it is an actor motion, and the evaluation of every single analysis that everything makes must be in the interest of Thomas Aquinas himself. What is this debate not about? This debate is not about which of these views are superior to the other, because either there is a stalemate on the conservation, on the conversation around whether one view is maybe superior to the other or not. We don't think this debate at any point in time should be weighed on which of the view is more superior to the other. The second thing is, we think this debate is also not about how Thomas Aquinas' parents would feel towards his choice or his view in and of themselves, because he is the single most important actor in this debate. But secondly, because Thomas Aquinas, at the point where he decided to interrogate both views, is independent of parental indoctrination. He's not a child anymore. He's an adult who has made a lot of research into either of the views, and it's unlikely that his parents' decision towards this choice and whichever one he chooses is something that should be a consideration at any point in this debate. What does giving up this side look like on our side of the house? There are 3 things here in the context. The first is, what giving up looks like is that Thomas himself does not just forget about his anti-natalist position. He just becomes, one, less interested in the supremacy of the idea in and of itself. But secondly, it means that he does less research into the validation of his position on any conversation about the moral interrogation of whether we should bring people into this world. But thirdly, and more importantly, it means that Thomas Aquinas on our side of the house is more open-minded to conversations on whether or not people or children are moral significant beings, because in the absence of giving up this, he's unlikely to want to be open-minded to it on our side. This means, by virtue of this context, that the flip is exactly what we want him to do for the context of agnostic ideas in of themselves. That he's not open-minded. He doesn't want to have any conversation at all about whether or not God actually really exists, but he holds on to this narrative strongly in and of themselves. Next part. Who is Thomas? What makes up Thomas? And why is Thomas going to probably think in the way we think here? The first is, Thomas was born into a religious home, which means at the core of his foundation, from being a child, his parents indoctrinated him heavily into being religious. But secondly, this debate may be in the context or in the time frame for which it refers to Thomas of Aquinas was a time frame in which the religious identities in of themselves had a lot of backlash in terms of people's identity towards them. So people were either like not exactly happy with not exactly happy with overly religious people in and of themselves, which means maybe there was some like backlash to that identity in and of itself. But secondly, he was born into a moderately conservative home. This means that his parents are not so tough. This is also another reason why we believe that even if we have to, at any point of this debate, interrogate what his parents think, we don't think they're probably going to be that insane that Thomas decides to. But even if they are, we really don't. This debate is not about whether his parents are going to be happy or not with his decision. The debate is about whether Thomas decides to do this and whether he's going to find utility in doing so. If in the process of finding that utility, he pisses off his parents, we don't care. He does not explicitly say this, but he does this to you when it tries to tell you that it's easier to believe in that particular belief as opposed to believing in this. Like all of those things in themselves are things that form elements of whether or not an idea is superior. Because what of us wants whether an idea is superior is whether or not that idea is more believable. And what wants whether or not that an idea is more believable, it depends on how easy you are able to like necessarily rationalize it on the level of logic to be able to attain that particular stuff. But two, all of the analysis, and this is why that framework initially was brilliant before he undermined it. All of the whole analysis he gave as to how comes, like, his parents indoctrinated him in this idea also falls flat, because the same way his parents were religious was also the same way his parents equally believed in having children. Hence the reason why they had him. So it means that all of those principles that he gave you around why, like, he failed to show how it is asymmetric, because some of those principles still apply in this instance, given that his parents equally indoctrinated him against having children. All of those, his speech in itself is symmetrical in itself. But then a key nuance, and this is motion analysis in itself, is that they fail to read the info slide. And because they fail to, like, necessarily read the info slide, they fail to take notes that this debate is not just happening to Thomas Aquinas at any point in time. This debate is happening to Thomas Aquinas in the defining decade of Thomas Aquinas' life. Why is this something that is very, very critical? What defines the defining decade? Oftentimes, what defines the defining decade, because this decade usually comes up at times where people are within the age of 20 to 30. What defines it is that during this particular time, people in themselves, usually youths in themselves, usually opt for things like fun, freedom, because this is just the time when they're necessarily just getting liberation from their parents, either getting into university or just finishing from the university in themselves. What else? And notice that the reason why it's called the defining decade is because the decisions you take during this decade in itself has the propensity of defining what your entirety of your life in itself will turn out to be. But oftentimes than not, these are these things like research. Scientists have discovered that most youths during this particular time often live with regret in the long, like in the long term, about, like, the way they lived their defining decade. It means therefore that we cannot debate this debate in abstract. It must be within the context of the defining decade, in terms of what world is better able to give Thomas Aquinas the best form of self-actualization moving forward. Because when we are trying to rationalize decisions, we rationalize it on the basis of what gives us the best kind of utility. First extension, or first case in itself. The first case is the idea that was giving birth to religious parents. They tell you should not talk about that, but then that's for them. They are not dumb. The idea, there's a reason why CAP included in the motion. The idea that they give you is that you are independent of indoctrination at this point. Notice that this case is independent of that preemptive rebuttal. The first reason why we should care about the parents is because of this. It means that the society, this is the first mechanism, the society he was raised in is religious. The society he was raised in is religious. It means that most of the people that are around Thomas Aquinas, probably at this particular point in time, is equally, like, people that are religious in and of themselves. But secondly, understand that these kinds of societies have people within these kind of societies that are more likely to favor people with shared beliefs. Because again, the motion tells you about how the parents in themselves are religious, but then it also tells you about how they are mildly conservative. One of the things that necessarily favor this kind of, like, necessarily characterize this kind of, like, groups in themselves is that they usually favor people that have their own beliefs. This is not to say that they would outrightly discriminate against you. It's just that you have an edge if you are a Christian and you are a Christian, especially within these kind of societies that are more likely to do things like hire you to their jobs and stuff like that. But three is that religion within this, especially in the context of religion in itself, is oftentimes something that people have strong ties to. They see, and oftentimes it has the capacity to affect the relationship that people necessarily have with others. What are the impact of this? It's only within the purview of our world that this individual has community support. Because if you add all of these things in itself together, all this analysis I gave you together, you begin to realize how course it becomes difficult for community support to be something that these individuals in themselves are able to extrapolate. The reason why this is very critical, especially within this particular time, is because it's quite difficult to
that they meet you does not grant you the ability to do things like go to clubs, enjoy your life, and stuff like that. But three, that within the period of their world where they are open to the possibility of children, they run a risk of getting kids in and of itself. The reason why that is bad is considering the fact that it's in a defining decade, and considering all of the different characteristics about defining decade, it means that it runs a risk of even giving birth to kids and necessarily neglecting them in the long run, which increases the amount of regret that he feels that are already characterized concerning the defining decade in and of itself. But lastly, and more importantly, that within the idea of our world, embracing the anti-agnostic position creates a checking mechanism against the excesses of the defining decade. And this is critical because it brings us to debate. The idea here is that religion in itself speaks against all the many excesses that exist when it comes to this defining decade number. These are all of those negatives, all of those vices necessarily exist. So it means therefore that you don't have a checking mechanism against them. Meaning that the ability for you to now go excessively within the period of the defining decade now becomes something that's limited, thereby reducing the ability or the likelihood of you to have regrets. But secondly, is the community you create and the increased affiliation you have with your parents, by virtue of not necessarily faulting on their religious community, necessarily mean that even in the worst case scenario where you necessarily have regrets, you are better poised to have a community that you can fall back to that supports you on every single level on what makes someone within the defining decade to be able to self-actualize. We will. Their case is contextual. They do. You have a hill that is taller than you to climb.
Then you go find that hill.
Alright, first of all, shout out to the top boys, to the CFC of this tournament. Thank you guys for being here. And also to everybody that decided to show up for this tournament. And then shout out to my partner, who was my very first dates partner. And in that tournament, we broke, not break. On 2 out of 15 points. And 2 out of 15 points. In the last round, everybody, including the judges, were not going to break. I mean, look at us now. To the actual debate, I'll start my speech in 3, 2, 1. To panel, right? What Scott's speech has did for you necessarily is contextualize what the idea of how this ideology ties to the realities of this individual. They claim that, oh, they don't talk about this defining moment. I think that's implicit in the conversation that he has. Because he tells you, now look, this individual is at a level at his age where he has become interrogative of every single idea and narrative that has been taught him. It means that at that point in time, he's weighing his options to decide what narrative do I go on to implement in the course of my life and also pass on to my children along or pass on to people that I decide to cater for within the context of this event. What does he tell you? He tells you that this conversation is not about supremacy. I don't know if he doesn't know English. It's not about the ideologies themselves, but about how his reality at that time period ties back to that ideology necessarily. So it's not necessarily that we are comparing, believe in God versus not having children. It's about where he is currently and what he should be bothered about the most. Right? Why is that something that is important for him to buy and be able to give up the word about children? Because first and foremost, the information that he has is one that is religion-wide. The idea of giving birth to children or not giving birth to children is not necessarily a religious conversation. It's a social conversation. It means that the indoctrination that is negative, that is antithetical to, that he's angry at, is not the one that says, do not give birth to children. Society is a societal conversation. He has seen the net benefits, the net positive of people who have had children. He can interrogate the net negative also as well. So it's easier for him to make that say, I'm still cool with individuals wanting to have children because some children can become moral actors in themselves. Why is it worse for him to comparatively want to give up the idea of having that religious narrative in himself? Like Scott tells you, this individual necessarily has this, was indoctrinated. When these guys talk about community support, right? They say, oh, he needs a community. In the same line, they forget that this negative, because at this point in his life, it's a negative indoctrination. No, panel. This negative indoctrination is not only meted out by his parents, or by the same stupid community that they are mentioning in the context of this debate. It means then that not only is he antithetical to his parents and antagonistic to them, he's also antagonistic to those communities themselves. It means he doesn't give a bloody fuck about their supporting and official. They need to prove why they didn't need that support. And then he gets on to say something, you cannot survive if you don't have support. Fuck you, bro. I think the individuals are going to be known actors in the society and make things for themselves, and of themselves, right? Ask them to, we did not need anybody. The next thing that they talk about, right, is on the idea his parents, shut the fuck up, right? The next thing he talks about is the idea of his parents. Right? Again, he doesn't understand nuance. Because what Mascot tells you is that he don't care. He doesn't, at that point in time, he gives less fuck about what his parents care about him anymore. Like they also claim, he's 20 to 30. It means at that point in time, he's also shifting away from the dependence on those parents and of himself. It means that he's starting to have jobs. He's starting to sleep with women and all of those things. His parents' opinions are not going to be back for. The point then becomes, why then should he be so concerned about what mommy will do by 12 a.m. tonight? But I will tell you, however, that what will happen is this, right? We argue outright that one of the core ideas of this conservatism is this one, even if analysis, before you say it's contradictory. Even if on the core ideas of conservatism is that there's a continuation of life that should happen as a spirit through procreation. It means that his parents also will be aligned with him wanting to change and flip to say, oh, drop this particular narrative in our officer. Then this means that in both worlds as well, we think his parents could be angry. It's a fiat in the house. We think his parents might be angry here. We think his parents will be angry regardless of whatever decision he makes. We don't think that's a conversation that we can bring into the debate and hold him into it. As long as we can figure out exactly how his parents will react, we fail in this debate. The next, however, is done by it. That Scott tells you why they are likely to accept an introspection into God. Because we already tell you how this negative ideology, because there's something that is important about Infostat. He claimed that I didn't do Infostat. We probably couldn't do it. Because what they literally said is that not only is this ideology based on he not believing in God, it's based on the realities of individuals that live within the context of that world. He means that he lives in Nigeria or he lives in the US. He's seeing ICE agents murder people. He's seeing Boko Haram kill people. He's seeing life being treated as less. He's seeing women being raped and so on. His question then becomes, why should I believe in a God that allows the continuation of this evil to continue to exist? That's the more rational conversation to have as against whether I should fuck and give birth to a child or not. Do better, guys. Now, how is this something that we basically prove your point, please?
You can't say that his parents indoctrinated him, religiously, and now say that parents do not have the capacity to equally indoctrinate them.
Understand something like how indoctrination works. What happens is that when you're born, right, your parents take you to church every Sunday, or they take you to mosque every Friday, and then they teach you the words and all of those things. So it means that it happens for a very long time period of continuous indoctrination. You are reading Bible on Wednesday, if you're a Redeemite, you're going for the things that you do, and stuff like that. Right? You're going for faith clinic and all of those things. Christians, Catholics are taking communion. But for birth, I don't think any of us have had up to 10 conversations with their parents about whether or not we should have children or not. Those are not conversations that happen really. That indoctrination, to say that, because the parents gave birth to you, they automatically indoctrinate you to give birth to another person, is such bad that she's foolish. And also the thing that there has been constant in the instances where even birth itself is something that becomes involuntarily opted out of, right? So the instances where you might not even be able to do that, I don't know how someone is going to indoctrinate you into something that you have no capacity to necessarily control. They have to put out that's something that actually happens in the context of their world, right? So, panel, why do we do this debate in and of itself, right? For opening government, we tell you specifically what this guy's life looks like currently. We tell you also specifically why that life in and of itself in this time period is one that is also very antagonistic to the general ideologies. Also notice how this ideology that he's going to keep for the rest of his life is one that has directly affected him, and not just him, that's also affected his introspection in the rest of reality as regards to how the world is failing necessarily. The next thing also is that we are able to also prove to you how the fact that you're being born into a religious home, you're just shackled into an ideology that you don't own yourself. You then become more incentivized to interrogate the ideology and act on on what the God's narrative should necessarily look like for you in and of itself. Because if you're going to want to believe a God that you have considered all your life, and you're seeing that this God realistically does not give you any net benefit, it makes sense for you to necessarily question that God's existence or the net benefit of having that God in your life. And then, however, we think it's more important for him to impart it to a better narrative, because why? The idea of death is social and not religious and has not done anything fucking to him. Yeah.
Yeah, that's my goal. Let's go.
Thank you very much for experiencing very much.
End the debate.
I don't know. Shout out, I guess. So, first of all, I'm surprised as much as, especially when that I'm actually there. I never expected it. But shout out to EJ for
EJ?
yeah, for no problem.
Okay.
And more importantly, I think shout out to the organizers of this tournament.
Yeah.
It's a really great one, sincerely, one that competes with some of the best tournaments in the country. And this would be a crux of my case to show why they also lose. And finally, yeah, to everyone who has kept the society running, and to my partner also, my last tournament before I left the circuit briefly was actually with him. We made it to the finals, we didn't win. Let's hope the second time is the charm. Finally, Sorry, I missed one. Okay, panel, I'll begin my speech in 3, 2, 1. So, opening government says it's not about superiority, but still end up arguing superiority in the last majority of instances. But then they then say that Alex, he should be closed-minded. Thomas should essentially be closed-minded in the world that we live in. We think that's very essentially bad for the world that they live in, because Thomas is in the peak stage of his life, right? He's in the defining decade of his life. The last thing any human being wants to do at the defining decade of his life is to be closed-minded inherently. What does it mean to be closed-minded? It means that Thomas wouldn't be able to work for an overly religious boss in the office. It means Thomas wouldn't be able to have a colleague who is extremely religious in the grand scheme of things, because maybe once or twice they'll play a QMA and they'll be like, what kind of nonsense is that, right? What it essentially means is that he wouldn't be able to succeed in life, because he lives in a society where people have different views, different beliefs, and different customs. It means essentially you must be openly minded within that society to essentially exist and thrive. It means he lives in a lonely world and dies of extreme depression or anxiety or suicide. This is the worst case scenario, but it's also extremely possible. It means their case is wrong. I don't even understand why I'm still engaging them, essentially. Then we say, oh, agnosticism is like an effect of him being oppressed. Who told them that the parents even oppressed them in the first place? The fact that I am from a moderately conservative home does not mean that my parents are going to oppress me. What happens in those homes is that, okay, you don't want to go to church, and don't greet me. But these parents will still pay your fees, these parents will still send you to school, these parents will not kill you, you still exist well. So it means the reason for his agnosticism is not necessarily because his parents are oppressed or anything. So that doesn't even thrive essentially in today's debate. Then he says, oh, it is easier to speak with anti-natalism other than because he's human, but it's crazy because first of all, there's actually no proof that it is easier to speak with anti-natalism in the first place, simply because we are oppressed, because that's good the analysis, right? I think it's easier to speak, it's easier to stick with the existence of even a God for very fundamental reasons, because you live in a world that is extremely bad. The Director General of the World Trade Organization said a few weeks or months ago that we live in a world that continuously goes bad and bad and bad. So it is not reversible. So what countries have to do is to create buffers. But it will definitely get to a state where countries cannot create buffers. It means it is then easier to be angry at the way the world is right now. That is so bad that children shouldn't even come into the world than be angry that God, believe that God exists. But let's tie it down to our initial argument. Why does it give bigger net benefits to believe in the existence of a God, especially in the defining moments of your life, than even anti-Natalism in itself? It is essential to note that the existence or the belief in the existence of a God promises you some divine benefits. If you agree that as a person in the defining moment of your life, things are extremely tough, you want to get jobs and everything, and someone tells you, if you pray to God, maybe as you go into that interview, that person would see your face and like you and give you the job. Other than assuming the other side of God, I think it's a bigger net benefit. Why? Because you lose nothing. Right? The highest thing that will happen is you go to church, you go for Bible study. It's the same way you go to club. It's the same way you go and meet your crush or whatever. It means they lose nothing significant by believing in God or like shifting from agnosticism and taking it off. What it necessarily means is that Thomas, at the defining stage of his life, has the chance of even doing better and being happier by shifting from agnosticism. Because in the chance where it is true, I believe it is, but in the chance where it is true that there is a God, and when you believe in him, you get divine benefit, it means you're most likely not going to go into the hands of kidnappers. It means he will probably speak to you when you're supposed to go out to the night and they'll kill you. It means that Thomas will probably live a way better life than in their side of the world, essentially. This also asks for a case to show you that the extreme net benefits that he gets essentially within his world, right? But panel, the aligning factor in both of Thomas's dilemma is choice. What it means is that Thomas has choice as the number one thing in his mind. When you also agree on narratives, the number one thing you want is proselytization. So panel, which of these two ideologies erodes choice the more? It is the other. It is the one where you bring children into a world that is fundamentally bad, that is fundamentally crippled, where they don't even have the choice to determine if they want to be in that world, essentially. Because agnosticism says, choose whether to believe in God, right? The idea behind that is because he agrees on choice, and he agrees that he should debate on things that exist in this world and shouldn't be forced to accept things that exist in this world. When you bring a child into this world without their consent, you erode choice essentially. So since we have proven that is the number one thing that aligns Thomas's choices and the things he believes in this world, it means if he has to, the motion assumes he has to get rid of one. It means he shouldn't lose himself, because getting rid of the one, or sticking with one that erodes his fundamental belief, which is choice and the ability to choose, necessarily erodes him of the human he is, and means he's starting afresh in life. It means it becomes tough for him to engage in things in society. He starts to question himself, question his choices, and everything that exists within the world, right? But then, of course, right, we then show which one gives at least the lowest risk possible, because you're choosing between two, right? What is the lowest risk? We've said it earlier. We think it's a greater risk, like he said, when you create children, bring them to this world, and eventually regret it. But if you decide to be agnostic and change your mind later on in the day, essentially, it's no much risk for you, because we show you net benefits within that world. So he becomes unhappy with his wife, unhappy with his kids, unable to train them. He's being dragged in court for child benefits, or what they call those things in American courts, essentially. See, we win because we engage the present state of Thomas's life, and what is most likely that Thomas would believe in at this point of his life, that is the defining stage of his life. But essentially, when we then talk about community, it's essential that happens, because see, from 1 to 20, the people that you live with and the people you continue to live with, it's most difficult to find friends at 20. That's why the top boys still exist and have this tournament. If we alone wouldn't have done this, it means to scale up in life, you essentially need community. Thomas lacks community in his world. In a world where his parents are also not happy, not just his friends, his siblings, his neighbors, the people closest to him. The alternative is moving to a new country. A lot of people who have moved to new countries have said they are depressed and they want to be in their state. The last thing you want to do move out of your community at 26, 29, 30. That's why people always marry within themselves and hardly change at that point. He lives a miserable life if he chooses government work. We win.
Nobody wants.
Yeah, so the way it will happen is I'm going to take on QI from opening opposition. My partner is going to take one from C, just to ensure there is symmetric engagement. So, a couple of shout outs first. So first things first, a couple of shout outs. I'm shouting out first because I think there are about 2 novices from my union that are present in the this time around. So I'm shouting out to those particular novices, but I'm also shouting out to the administrators of the club after I stopped doing the event. The idea that they are still having novices. And even the one before me, for training me and also for training me in this sort of instances. I think the second persons of the second category of persons I'm also shouting out is still the mascot, the willingness to always convene a tournament of this magnitude and execute it.
All of you know they shout that to me.
Yeah, and Chrissy also. So just a caveat to the panel to the audience. There are 2 things. Innovative, they are going to shout. This one I'm not going to shout. So please just help me. But secondly, please everyone just keep silent so that I can listen to me clearly and so that you can come out, because I'm not going to run a philosophical event. I'm going to run about mathematics, so I need everyone to listen. So with that being said, I'm going to start in 3. I'm going to start in 3. Sorry, give me a sec. I'm going to start in 3, 2, 1. I think the first piece of clarity that I had in mind right before the start of this round, really does it. Talking about what the defining age or defining decade of your life looks like. I think it's important for me to contextualize it for them because it's the defining age of your life. It's more likely the time that you are done with university and you are entering into the workspace. And this would be very crucial because that determines to a great extent whether you have the economic capacity to take care of a child. Decide to start bearing children, or if you start saying that antinatalism is something that is morally wrong. But the second thing is that the decisions, the decisions of children, the decisions of people is ultimately dependent on consequences. So the extent of whether when you give up antinatalism, whether you have the time to literally enjoy having children, but secondly, whether there will be lesser levels of risk at a point where you give up agnosticism. Let's talk about opening opposition and let me explain literally 4 pieces of characterization why you can't find that solo argument. There are 4 things here. The first thing is that within religion, it requires things like festivals and other events that require each individual member of that society participating so that they can be considered a valid member of the society. So what it looks like is that within the North, if Thomas Aquinas was a Muslim, if he doesn't participate in Eid, it means that already individuals within that particular community will start hating on him from the point where he started having those beliefs, which means that the incentive to remain within that community doesn't literally exist. But the second thing is that most religions are ultimately judgmental. So you have terms like Gentile, unbeliever, pagan. All of these things are most religious individuals. Why is this then crucial? It means that you don't even have friends in the first place because the friends that you have are individuals that ultimately believe in things like God and the idea of bearing children. So literally, you don't even have a community in those sort of instances. But the fourth thing here is that 5 stages of regret. When you literally have access to parents, they will probably told you, please change this opinion, please pray for you, etc. Which means they have probably come to an acceptance that you are probably never going to change because you are probably gotten to your defining decade, which is the point where you are getting access to education and you are ready to enter the workplace. Which means literally you have migrated away from that society and that community that they are saying that you need support for. This characterization already explains why opening opposition can't win this tournament. Let's talk about the extensions then. The first thing I'm going to talk about is about time. And why this is the only time that you have, the only time that you can enjoy antinatalism the more. I think there are 2 things to note here about antinatalism. you need to be at your productive capacity, because that's the only time you can work and be able to provide for children. If you still believe in antinatalism and you get to your old age, two things. First is that you don't save for children because you are just catering for yourself, which means you can't even opt out. But the second thing is not just about savings. If you, at your old age, the possibility of you enjoying the dividends of you not believing in antinatalism is already reduced, because the number of years that you have to live on earth to probably cater for your children, to probably see them go through school and you'll be happy of their efforts greatly reduces, which means that this defining decade is the only optimal time for you to opt into into wanting children. What's the converse on their own side? Things like religion, you believe in religion doesn't require any time, because the utility of religion is predicated on where you are at the afterlife. So even at your old age, you can literally convert and still enjoy the utilities of religion. The utility of believing in Christendom is not predicated on the sort of life you live currently in the present. It's rather predicated on whether you can make heaven. It's rather predicated on whether you can make heaven or hell, which means even at your own age, on the outside of the house, when at your own age, it means that it has literally no utility. What has more utility for you on the outside of the house is when you convert at your young age and you can have access to children. Why is this then pragmatically more important? The first thing is that seeing ultimately your offspring outlive you, build legacy, go to universities, etc. is something that gives you epistemic access to happiness. On the outside of the house, you don't have that epistemic access to happiness. But secondly, this is the only mechanism that allows you to impact your doctrine or your beliefs literally on them. Because I think ultimately all humans have an incentive to indoctrinate into people, which means that the only time that you have the capacity to do this is at your defining age where you can give birth to children and literally impact to them in those sort of instances. This already shows you why you are more likely going to have higher levels of productivity, because when you have access to children and you're ultimately then happy, it means that you go to your workplace, feel fueled, etc., which means that you add higher levels of happiness and dopamine literally into your life. Let's talk about the second thing in extension, then, which is literally about risk. What's the view?
It's foolish to say that, oh, not safe simply because we don't want children. But secondly, you cannot necessarily argue just the extremes within the purview of the world in terms of benefits without considering to the extremes in terms of legacy that necessarily happens to you, such as you necessarily dying before that time.
3 seconds. The motion already assumes that you are within the defining decade, and you probably you have that decade to make that particular decision, which means it's not necessarily about you probably dying. That can be the debate. Because if that's the debate, it means that your own impact can materialize. Let's talk about risk then. I think if you give right now, you already know of the harms happening to children in status quo. You already know of the thousands of children dying in different countries. And you know that as a person, if you give up antinatalism, you need to take care of your child. Why is this then ultimately important? It means that when you give up antinatalism and you start giving birth to children, you are in the best position to take care of those children, because conversely, when you were believing in that particular philosophy, you already know why children suffer, you already understand the importance of taking care of children, which means on our own side of the house, you are best equipped to deal on our own side of the house, you are literally best equipped to take care of children, to understand them, and literally protect them. But second, it involves lesser risk, because your ability to take care of your child requires collaboration between you and literally your partner. What's the converse of religion? If you decide to give up agnosticism and start practicing religion, it requires multiple factors that is not literally within your control. It requires you having access to probably believing the best version of religion, because different religions possess different things and all of them say they are the best. So the extent to which you have epistemic access to know that the sort of religion that you probably choose on their own side is something you don't know. So you don't know whether Christianity is better or Islam is better, which means that you're literally taking a risk. But secondly, it means that religious figures ultimately can also be pervasive, which means that the extent to which they can guide you is something that is not necessarily assured. For all of these reasons, closing up.
They're the ones that subsidize my love for the Yeah, and shout out to my partner. Yeah, I literally forced him to come to this. Alright, so let's go. If you have a QI, I will definitely take one. So you can just raise your hand. Alright. So I'm going to start my speech in 3, 2, 1. What does Thomas care about in this debate? 3 things. He's probably ambitious like the average young individual. He's in the defining decade of his life, so he cares about how this is going to shape his future and whatever. But thirdly, he's also a moral person. You can get this from the fact of these 2 beliefs, right? He believes that the world is terrible, so he's intrinsically moral and wants to make the world a better place, kind of. So when we say in this debate that you're going to give up on one of those things, it means that because the people's life is clear, that you believe kind of in the core values of these things. What you're giving up is that even though you might still have these ideas, it just means you're going to be participating in those things. So if you give up on anti-natalism, you're going to have kids anyway, doesn't mean that you're not an you don't still hold those core values and stuff like that. That clarity is going to become important within the body of my speech. So what happens when you become agnostic, right? It's either 2 things. Either you're actively deceiving your family, that means hiding from them, or you're in active conflict with them, right? We think that even if they decide to support you because they say, okay, your parents were not that serious, but even if they decide to support you, we think that not sharing a core value with one of your parents kind of loses the bond that you have with them. So we think this is still a bad thing in their world. But let's move beyond that, right? For CG, we don't really care that you might not be able to have kids in the future because again, you believe those things. So why would you want to have kids in the future? Worst case scenario, right? Technology is everywhere and it's a man. So basically, you actually can have kids later on or you can adopt whatever. We don't think that's necessarily relevant to the theory of this debate. But let's go then to 4 things in extension, right? So I'm going to firstly interrogate how this is going to affect your living in community and how this on our side of the world makes you a better member of society. First thing then is third-party harms. We think the reason why you shouldn't give up on being an anti-natalist is that if you do give up and you decide to have a wife, you decide to have children, what this means is that you're going to bring people into your own belief. What this means is that if you're actively having a wife and you truly are anti-natalist, it means you're more likely going to hate that wife, or hate those children that you bring. The reason why this is especially terrible is the effect that it has on society. Why? Because if you are because the best case scenario on their side is that maybe you don't hate them, maybe you're an absent parent, you end up bringing children into this world that are going to be traumatized to society because you're an absent parent that doesn't truly want to have kids. We don't think the fact that you end up harming your wife, you end up harming your children because you don't actually participate in their upbringing. We think that this causes some level of third-party harms and we don't want it in society. But also, why do you care about this? I already gave you a framework that you're a moral person. You want the society to become better. If you're an absentee parent and you bring in children that will traumatize society and are bad individuals in society, the society doesn't get better. Instead, your probability to be harmed that you very much hate. We think that this is going against your core values. This is why you should care about it. We don't think you should actively participate in this harm.
It is likely that Thomas will not have children on either side of the house because these ideas are just ideas anyways. All the analysis in closing up on the children is speculative.
So they said it's likely that these people don't have children. It's ridiculous. Because if you give up on being anti-natalist, right, you are going to have children. That's literally what it means. You're giving up on it. That is your children to participate in those things like having a wife, having a child, all those things, right? So I don't know how that particularly works, right? But secondly, we think it's better to be religious, right? And give up on being agnostic. Why? Because this just makes you a better member of society. Because most times, at least the general religions have good moral codes and stuff stuff that makes you, a community that makes you accountable. We think that when you get more moral people in society, you get a better society. But even if you don't buy that, the fact that if you believe that the world is fucked up, the world is depressing, we think it is important for you to hold on to hope pure, true religion that doesn't make you like fucking depressed and fucking hate as an outsider. When more aggressive towards them, you're not going to rate their opinions. All those things. When more aggressive towards them, you're not going to rate their opinions. All those things. We think that what this means is that due to the fact that religious people are the majority people in society, you're never going to be able to run away from religion. So you're always going to meet religious people. And by the time you're hostile to them, because you think that they're implicitly immoral, this affects your basic quality of life. This then goes beyond what opening opposition says to say, oh, community, you lose your active community. We say on our side of the world, you're never able to find any other community in your life because religious people are basically the majority and then you are actively hostile to them. Meaning that you're never able to find like any other community, any level of support. So even if, because their word is like, oh, at the end of the day, we can have other people to depend on. We don't think that you're going to find that alternative on our side of the world, and that's particularly important in this debate, right? We think why then it is better to like give why then it's better to like just give up on like on agnosticism, right? We think that on our side of the world, where we believe that at least you're moral and better, it means that you're moral and better than other people. It means that you're not actively hostile to them because you don't think that they're implicitly immoral. That is the like consideration and within how you engage better in society. But I think the things we need to judge this debate on, firstly, we prove to you how you bring other innocent individuals into your into your own belief, right? We think this is particularly terrible, and the most important impact in this debate because you care about society. You don't want society to be fucked up because like you're raising fucked up children. Thank you.
Thank you, member of opposition for our speech. We invite
Victor, your audience have waited this long to hear you.
They should have made the fight
Go see shaft you.
Alright, before I start my speech, shout out. The first, shout out to myself. I think I'm the only one who have made 4 finals of the year right. Yay!
How many have you won?
This will be the first. Because I've judged in finals twice, what's with the 2024, but it doesn't matter. You only take one. Alright, secondly, I'm going to shout out to Anydc, even though he didn't shout out to me. We won our invitation out together, and these niggas called us out that we should come and do it here. So that's what and last week to YOC, every member here, Johnson, Economos Lord, Video, Michelle, and everyone in here with this and everyone that made this tournament fantastic. With that being said, I said no, are you here with this? Just here with this. But I am going to restart. Alright, I'm going to be starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. Our moral shapes us and makes us who we have. If I have the idea that having children is immoral,
I'm most likely not going to give birth to one because it's against my idea. If I believe it is good, I'm most likely going to give birth. Which means humans are shaped by their morals. All the extension from these guys to say, oh, we can be against having children, but go and have children. Like, it doesn't make sense. It doesn't work that way. All those things are basically out of the debate. But there are 4 things from seal. First is that, oh, you can have this anti-nihilism idea and you're still going to give birth regardless. I'm also just going to prove on our side that you can also be an agnostic person and still just love religion. Like, that's terrible way of debating. You should know better. But the second thing they say is that you're most likely going to hate your wife. Again, read the info slide. It says that you're going to be giving up on this particular idea. So you've given up on that particular idea. An idea that you've given up, it doesn't make sense for you to say that you're going to hate your wife and children based on that particular idea. It doesn't make any sense. The third thing they say is that, oh, we agree that like our status quo is bad, but we should hold on to the opium of religion. This doesn't make sense for 3 reasons. One is because you live in a bubble which is always going to burst, because you go into the society and still see the evil things when you leave your church. It doesn't make sense. What's true is that you most likely have more expectations from religion because they know that you are living in that particular bubble and your existence is on it. But the last thing is you're most likely never going to be able to have a personality of your own, which is bad for this particular like actor, because it's most likely always going to want to stand on its own. The last thing that they say is that you're most likely going to hate religious people. You have to read. When you're agnostic, it doesn't mean you're a jihadist that is going to start killing people and bombing people. It just means that you really don't care if God exists or not. If God exists, you really don't think it's something that you can prove or not. It doesn't just mean that all these bad things happen. I think these guys have to read more and know how debating works. But let's talk about Oku. There are 4 things from Oku. The first is that they say that you have a community of people, 2 things like religious communities. There are 2 things here. One is that religion takes away a huge part of your youthful life. You go to church about 3 times a week if you're a good Christian. If you're a Muslim, you pray 5 times a day. You won't oppose the 5 pillars of Islamic religion. Every religion comes with everybody. We regret a community that robs you of your productive time and allows you to keep on pumping your money, your resources, and your energy into it. This guy is at his productive time. He shouldn't be using his productive years rotting away in church, mosques, or temples, or anything you want to call it. But the second response here is that most of these things going up within religious communities are not really the best things. You have pastors siphoning funds and all sorts of things. They paint a dystopian of what religion is, as if religion is the perfect thing that has happened. Most of the work that we've seen in humanity has happened because of because of religion. You always have religion expectation. They just create a dystopian of reality. The second thing that they say is that you need this community so that the community is going to support you. It doesn't make sense. Not only religion exists, there are different like social institutions within like the world. I am currently in the debate circuit. I make friends with most of these guys. They exist with or without like religion. It doesn't make any sense. This is 2026, 21st century. There is social media, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. A lot of people get more of real love on social media than they even get from religious institutions that these guys are just basically like pretenders. But you can always have like a community with or without this particular thing. The last thing that they say from opening opposition that destroys all their case is that they say, and opening opposition too says this, that the world is extremely tough. Don't bring anyone into it. But if you don't listen to any of the response, listen to this. Their characterization that the world is shitty collapses all their impact on religion. The concept of religion is that a God that is all-powerful and all-knowing exists. What happens then is that this powerful God allowed all these deaths, all these genocides, all these bad things that have been happening since time immemorial. So it does 2 things. One, it probably means that this particular God is fucking shit and compensate for all these bad things that have happened from time immemorial. But 2 is that your analysis on how he created this particular terrible world already means maybe I shouldn't care if they exist or not, or all those sort of things. I like the fact that you're enjoying it. Let's talk about why my partner wins the debate immediately. The first thing there that pushes us above like opening, that my partner was able to do more framework to explain the context of the defining decade. My partner explains that you are at your youthful age, which means that this is good because you most likely want to procreate and all sorts of things. The reason why this is good is because if they do it at this particular defining decade, they have the strength, they have the capacity, and all these sort of things to be able to train these particular children. When they are old and already about to die or stuff, they really don't have the ability to do these things. There are double benefits that exist on our world. Is that you taste a world without children, which is what you've been experiencing before, and you taste a world with children, which is something you exist after. This argument is independent of if this particular child is trained successfully or not. This argument is based on the idea that you're able to optimize your choice-making mechanism because you taste all word, you're a philosopher, so you most likely want to optimize your choice by tasting all word and all sort of things. What does this particular philosophers want? What philosopher wants is that they want the existence and the continuance of their ideologies. When you look at the best philosophers, you talk about the idea of Plato, Aristotle, Socrates, and all. These are people that stem off from each other. What happens in our world is that you have a guarantee that any idea that you pick, you're most likely going to have the continuity of your idea because it's giving birth to children that match most likely like follow this particular ideology that you have at the end of the day. So it means that on our side of the world, you are able to get like our benefits because you optimize choice and regardless of the outcome. Our benefit is independent of that particular outcome. Why is it valid to bring children into this world, regardless of like any pragmatic outcome? Opening never proves this. My brother explains this in two ways. One, the brother explains how you are deeply enriched in philosophy and all sort of things, which means that at the point that you're at the defining stage of your life, you know that these are the reasons why I previously didn't want to have children. You most likely now have the moral obligation and the pressure to want to correct those particular things, which means that you're most likely not going to like leave those children without training them. You're most likely going to train them because you've been able to gather knowledge throughout your life, which means you only get like the ability to train these children well on our side. But the second thing my partner proved under this is that it proves that up is most likely going to run that, oh, maybe the world is facing a lot of issues and all those sort of things. See, the only way you're going to have the solution to problems of humanity is not the erasure, is the procreation and continuation. That's how we're most likely going to have more brilliant minds and all sort of things. See, at the end of the day, what does this particular actor want? What he wants is a world where he's most likely able to fix all the problems of his parents with his new children. You never have the actualization of this particular actor in a world where he stops creating and where he stops giving a fuck about this particular narrative.
Yeah, that's my fault.
Everybody, my guy, I just debate, see the fight.
Yeah, the fight you. Nedu.
Hey guys, I guess everyone can hear me. I appreciate the silence and I hope it continues. So first off, shout outs. First off, thanks to God because it's only by His grace. After that, shout out to my parents. I know what's about how parents will support us. Mine supports me. I don't know, I love my parents, guys. Also, like shout out to my kids I'm training. I love you guys. You didn't shout out to me, sir, but now my housemates, I'll shout out to you. Even though I feel you. Thank you. Of course, JK dragged me here, but thank God. Also, shout out to Farid. Try Farid.com on your pages, test it out. There's an ongoing prediction obviously now, Cap, you guys know me. As your ancestor in this Cap game, but I appreciate what you guys are doing now. So we'll be starting in 3, 2, 1. So I understand that like, when it comes to principle arguments, the tendency for it to get over sophisticated. So I'm going to adjudicate this one ahead of time so it's very clear. So there are 3 things that have been expressed as concerns into this debate. The first one is about living a moral life. The second one is about being productive. The third one is about being happy. I'm going to show you how what JK does is probably the most revolutionary thing that's ever happened in debate in Nigeria and wins today's debate. Let's start. So first and foremost here, we need to set up some core premises that have outlined today's debate. Is that people don't just believe in things by just barely believing in things. It's not social ideologies do not exist by just mere faith. they are building blocks that define these ideologies. So if you are agnostic, you believe that, okay, first and foremost, I cannot prove the existence of God. The second ideology you believe in is, because I cannot prove the existence of God, then it is likely that I also cannot prove the non-existence of God. But I can see that the world is a bad place. So if that God exists, he is a bad person. And then if I support him, I am hence immoral. So if you then say that you choose to opt out of agnosticism, it doesn't mean that automatically you waive all the prior beliefs that you have, but it means that that core central belief is something that you are more flexible about, and how that shapes your identity. And the same thing runs for internationalism. I think this is largely said already by opening the already, and it's fair across board, and I think this is a fair definition. But I'm going to show you how this makes JK's argument special. Because JK starts off by saying a simple thing, that if you do not remove those core building blocks, and you go on to become less anti-natalist, what happens is simple. Is that because you are less anti-natalist, you are probably significantly and structurally more likely to give birth to children. And this means that the probability of you having a child goes up. But it's not just that simple. We live in societies that encourage people to have birth. Every single government in the world has policies designed to encourage childbirth. From things like subsidies for childbirth goods, to antenatal and prenatal care, to just simply promoting sex everywhere in the world. These are all structures that seemingly want people to give birth to children, which means if you are not significantly opposed against this, you are probably very likely to do this. Now, what happens when you do this is that despite you doing this, the core ideologies that build up your belief system have not changed. What that means is that by having those core belief systems, you are probably not in the right mind state to raise or have a child, or have even a wife or a mother to that child. One, you think you brought that child into the world, you think the world is a bad place. This influences the way you even talk to that child. You tell the world is a bad place. Always be on guard. Always be protected. Do not trust anybody. Those are things that can deeply traumatize the child. You think you and your wife probably did something problematic because you brought your child into a world that is a bad place. You look at your wife and say, why the fuck did you do this? And that in turn even stresses you out in your day-to-day. What that means is that you then perceive yourself as an immoral existence within that society, even though you still say, okay, natalism has some relevance to it. The problem with that entire setup is simple, is that the actor here is obviously someone that deeply cares about perceiving himself as a moral person. He has gone out of the way to read four moral ideas or four moral ideologies that like his moral beliefs for the simple goal of being moral. That means that on the moral clash, we have obviously won. But let me explain why this is the winning contribution. Because in the opening house, there's a clash that happens here that says which of these moral premises is more important. They say it's more important because, you know what, the idea of God is something that's just much larger. But they give a very good response to this by saying, you know what, Catholicism is also founded on very strong principles beyond just having an erection and conceive. And they actually respond quite well to that clash. The problem with that is that it becomes a wash. It doesn't show which one is the more moral side to take. We show you by the virtue of the fact that you do not create victims like your wife and your child that then become tangled in this moral country that you put yourself. You become a more moral actor on the comparative. What that means is that on the morality clash, it inevitably win. Because this is a wash, only our contribution starts. Common sense, very straightforward. But finally, on productivity and happiness, once again, JK dropped like a 90 in this room. Let me explain again. Secondly, what she does to her second argument. She says this, that there is an implicit difference between how you perceive these two things. And it says this, that agnosticism says that if you believe in the existence of a God, you are immoral. Because that means that you worship a bad person. Because the world is bad and if that God exists, he must hence be bad. So if you worship him, he is a bad person and you worship a bad person. Hence you are perceived as immoral. All antinatalism says is there is a reason why you give birth to kids. We understand that to maintain your growth of economies and societies, to give back to community. But there is also a significant and stronger moral obligation to not give birth to kids, like protecting the environment, adopting children, and the rest. It means that you do not perceive people that opt into natalism or give birth to children as implicitly bad people. You just see them as someone that chose the wrong side of a moral comparative. On the flip side, you see people that opt into Christianity or religion as implicitly bad people. Why is this problematic? Because it shapes the way you work and interact with society. Because to be very clear, every part of the world is religious. Even America says one nation under God. Even Europe has thousands of churches that they maintain and people that attend them. Everywhere in the world is religious. China has Buddhism. Everywhere has some form of religion that they opt into and subscribe into. What that means is, first and foremost, you can never truly evade religious structures, no matter how much you move.
What that means is that you are consistently trapped in a world where two things. You are producing value for society, and by producing value for society, you are producing value for immoral people. At the same time, if you are producing value for those immoral people, you then perceive yourself horribly in that society, because every moment you are productive, every moment you create wealth and it tax you, you've created wealth for bad people. If you work for your boss and your boss becomes wealthier in a society that is a Christian, you think, fuck, I just enriched a horrible human being. That deeply harms your sense of perception within that society. It deeply harms, first and foremost, your willingness to be productive within that society, which means your ability to fulfill your ambitions is significantly diminished and you're more likely to fail. But beyond that, it also deeply harms your happiness, because every time you achieve, you also achieve for people that you think you ought not to achieve for. But at the same time, every time you fail to fulfill your complete potential, which means that you are stuck in a country that forces you to be consistently unproductive, or at best semi-productive, and unhappy, or at best semi-happy. You trade off these two things. The flip side is, on our world, you can still be productive. Even if you make money for somebody that is having a child or having kids, you think, I've actually done a good thing, because we have created a better world that can actually better hold and better take care of children. By extension or by conclusion of this, you've inevitably done significant net good for the world. Now, finally, and this is where the comparative becomes so brilliant, is that on this comparative of productivity, what they talk about on this house is simply about whether you can contribute or you get family support. If you think you get family support, either way, your parents love you. All of you are trashed, to be fair, and your parents will stick with you guys. But we do make a significant change here by saying how your mentality and how your happiness is what. Very proud. Two people.
These guys, these are not going to share. All these people find out